Let us pray. O God, the source of all that is, this day marks an ending that leads to a new beginning, where memory leads us to hope, where the past prepares for the future, where our loose hold on security leads us into mystery, where we venture from the known to the unknown, where as we celebrate accomplishment, we move from stability to transition, from routine to adventure, from longing to the journey toward fulfillment, from motion to more motion, and finally to rest. May we be present to this moment of your creation and affirm with dedicated lives the trust we have in you as giver of life, leading us on to the resurrection of unending and ever joyful life. We ask this through Christ our risen Lord.
Amen. Amen.
As Chancellor of St. John's University, in the name of the sponsoring Benedictine community, and in the name of the Board of Regents, I herewith call into session this commencement convocation at the conclusion of our 143rd year of the conferring of academic degrees granted by the university. I request Brother Dietrich Reinhardt, President of the University, to take charge of these exercises.
This is a day of glad and joyful celebration. St. John's University has kept this day each spring since its founding in the days before the Civil War. The annals of St. John's are replete with descriptions of each year's commencement. The accounts year after year dwell on the charm at long last of the brief Minnesota spring, the sheer length of the ceremonies, and speeches invested with individual character by hundreds and hundreds of different speakers across the generations, but which, when considered together, have a remarkably similar ring. On this joyful day, in this long-hallowed place, you, the class of 2000, enter a long stream of St. John's graduates who gathered together one last time to celebrate how their lives had been enlarged by what they had learned here, by the teaching and mentoring of faculty known by their first name, by the cultivation of friendship and solitude, prayer and service, by the sheer beauty of this place and its power to anchor a whole life's journey. The spirit with which we all engage in this celebration is best described for me by the great Kiowa author M. Scott Momaday. Momaday writes this: "Once in his life, a man ought to concentrate his mind upon the remembered earth, I believe. He ought to give himself up to a particular landscape in his experience, to look at it from as many angles as he can, to wonder about it, to dwell on it. He ought to imagine that he touches it with his hands at every season. and listens to the sounds that are made upon it. He ought to imagine the creatures there and all the faintest motions of the wind. He ought to recollect the glare of the noon and all the colors of the dawn and dusk. We join together in a ritual that places us outside of time just a bit, so that all of us can concentrate our minds upon this remembered earth, shaped so indelibly by lives lived together in community the last 4 years. The ritual of commencement brings before us for a brief moment the habits of mind, the capacity for wonder, the inbreaking of truth, which result from the great amiable conversation between conflicting ideas, which is at the heart of this Catholic and Benedictine liberal arts community. Scarcely any one of us will actually remember much about this event, but it will live on to sustain the deepest truths of our lives. And so now it is fitting that as we enter into the heart of this commencement with the address by a member of this graduating class who has been selected by his classmates, please join me in welcoming Mr. Kevin Clancy.
I'm just a little bit shorter, so. I'm reminded today of a story from my youth. When I was but a wee lad of 3, my dad asked me if I would like a college education or a Corvette. The answer seemed straightforward enough to me, so I, in my early wisdom, eagerly answered, "Why, of course, a Corvette." I guess the question I have now is, Dad, is it too late to take you up on that offer? I stand before you today, 4 years later, without a Corvette, but sincerely honored, and quite honestly, slightly nervous, to be giving the student commencement address. Today, we are quite obviously transformed. Our parents' smiles, this strange and unique garb of the faculty, and indeed, our own bizarre, and might I add, warm, attire speak to a transformation. But what is it exactly that has transformed us? When asked to give the commencement address, I felt like I needed to articulate an answer to this question. However, while pondering the question, I became increasingly nervous as I could not find an answer. Moreover, upon reflecting about college, I realized that I could find few answers at all. In fact, I came upon the frightening notion that I think I knew more, or at least was more certain, graduating from high school than I do now graduating from college. A quick footnote for the parents. My guess is that most of you parents are sitting there thinking, okay, my son knew more in high school than college, 4 years, $20,000 a year. Maybe I should have eaten more with those complimentary lunch tickets. Give me a few moments before you become too concerned about this education that failed to provide answers. Upon reflecting about college, I found that I had more questions than I did answers. But is this wrong? Let us turn no further than our first-year symposium class. I remember that Socrates teaches us to search for questions and then to explore that which we do not know. In the Meno, Socrates says, "It is better if we believe that one must search for the things one does not know, rather than if we believe that what we do not know is impossible to discover, and we need not even try. Roughly several hundred years before Socrates, the Taoist sage Lao Tzu made a similar statement. When they think they know the answers, people are difficult to guide. When they know that they don't know, people can find their own way. Lao Tzu, like Socrates, states that answers are found in questions, mystery, and not knowing. So I suppose right now I could prove myself wise by stating, I don't know, and simply taking my seat. But then again, since we're dealing in paradoxes, have you ever heard of a short commencement speech? It's a rhetorical question that doesn't require an answer. I wonder, though, if there's something to be gained from this act of questioning. A major act of questioning that I experienced here in college was when I studied abroad in China during the fall of '98. For me, China was a perpetual state of question. I had to question prior images I had about the country and why my expectations weren't conforming to preconceived notions. Why didn't I see the staple Mao jackets? Why didn't I see the militaristic presence in China as portrayed in the US media? Moreover, these Chinese people that I had imagined as a brainwashed mass became very real people and friends. How was I to reconcile these competing images? Furthermore, upon returning home, I not only continued to question China, but I also began to question why we as Americans do what we do. China created far more questions than it did answers. Clearly, the importance of questioning is paramount to our education here at St. John's. One of the mission commitments of the Coordinate Mission and Values for the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University is to provide a unified liberal arts curriculum which focuses on questions important to the human condition, demands clear thinking and communicating, and calls forth new knowledge for the betterment of humankind. Notice that it is not answers, but questions that are noted as part of this mission. Has not this, in some way, been our experience here at St. John's? As a first-year student, I remember entering the university in search of answers. The professor's word was final, and I was but awaiting answers and instruction. However, as college progressed, I found that the answers weren't as apparent, and the world became much more complex than I had imagined in high school. Thus, rather than articulate the answer, I was encouraged to formulate the question. The professor's word was invitation rather than indoctrination. Indeed, I have found that the professors I have come to respect most are the ones who, rather than provide the answers, have encouraged me to question. We have, in a sense, evolved into questioning, whether in the classroom, in the dorm room, on the sports field, on stage, or on a study abroad experience. We have questioned. We may not ever find the answers, but we contemplated and questioned a larger and more complex world than we knew before college. So as we graduate, what does this mean, the importance of questioning? Clearly, it is one thing to question behind the pine curtain, but now we enter a world filled with explanation and objective answers. And ours is a society that wants answers. We want answers, and we want answers now. The faster one can answer, the better. We need not look any further than ABC's smash hit, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, to see this is the case. As Regis Philbin attests, there are answers, and these answers are worth money, and in some cases, a lot of money. In society, there are definite answers, and there are objective commitments. So to a certain extent, it may seem overly idealistic, even condescending, for me to stand up here and preach about the importance of questioning when we have some hurdles ahead of us that we believe require answers. What is the role, then, And where is the place of questioning beyond St. John's? Where does questioning begin, and where must it end? Yes, we have questioned here at St. John's, but where is the place of questioning once we get on I-94? I would go so far as to say that today is not the day questioning ends. Today is the day that the questioning must ultimately begin. For while we leave the institution of St. John's, we do not leave the education. We do not leave the experience. It is this perspective of questioning, this willingness to deepen our understanding, it is this experience, not the diploma, that is the mark of our education. It is this education of questioning that must continue. Today, the commencement is a celebration of the continuation of questioning. So to return to the question, where does questioning begin? I would like to draw reference to the Trappist monk and philosopher Thomas Merton. Merton writes that he who attempts to act and do things for others or for the world without deepening his own self-understanding, freedom, integrity, and capacity to love will not have anything to give others. While we may all too easily be drawn to the conclusion today of question everything and let's go save the world, Merton reminds us that questioning must begin with the self. Before we can offer anything to anyone, we must know ourselves and what we are about. Self-reflectedness is not selfishness. Moreover, self-questioning need not be a self-centered act. As we begin to question ourselves, we begin to realize how connected we are to others and how others' experiences shape our own. Providing answers is an independent act. The search for questions is, in fact, a search for connections and interdependence. As Merton suggests, questioning and self-reflection is very much tied to the capacity and the ability to love. Appropriately enough, this concept of reflection and love is central to the Benedictine tradition. The very first phrase that Benedict uses to begin his rule is listen and incline the ear of the heart. With this critical foundation, within this context of love, the questioning is not relative and self-serving. Rather, when based on love, questions unite us and draw us into the larger mystery of life, something we cannot define, but are ultimately called to experience. What is it that has transformed us today? I don't have the answer, but I think that's okay, for I believe quite possibly that it is the question and not the answer that is ultimately transformative. True wisdom and development is garnished not from the definition of answer, but from the journey of the question. We must question, and yet, at the same time, St. John's has taught us to love unquestioningly. For questioning to be constructive, directed, and just, we must not forget our capacity to love and be loved. Answers can divide, but questions can surely unite. I thank you for helping to shape my journey of question, and I pray for all of you in your ongoing journeys. May our continued questions bear witness to the deeper wisdom of unquestioning love.
The Honorable Diana Murphy is a dear friend of St. John's. 2 years ago, the Board of Regents named her Regent Emerita in recognition of her 19 years of distinguished service on the board, most recently as the board's own chair. And she continues to serve as an overseer of the School of Theology and Seminary. Countless St. John's alumni and faculty, administrators and regents know Diana Murphy as a dear friend. With a generous heart and a remarkable capacity to probe to what is deepest and most precious in every project she engages. We also know Diana, in Father Hilary Timish's words, as one who gives generously of her time, her intelligence, and her warm personality without a trace of exaggerated rhetoric. Today we recognize the full measure of this good and generous woman, a person of intellect and culture, widely recognized for the exceptional quality of her jurisprudence, acknowledged as a brilliant volunteer leader in all manner of social, cultural, and educational enterprises, and revered for her full-hearted pursuit of justice for all. It is a great joy to give this honor in the presence of Diana's sons, John and Michael. Diana, would you please stand? Minnesotans have come to expect great things from Judge Diana Murphy. The journalist who said this, reporting on your confirmation last year as chairwoman of the United States Sentencing Commission, was right. But he did not tell the whole story. It is not only Minnesota, but our entire nation that stands beholden to you, Judge Murphy, for the great things you have done through a lifetime of distinguished service to all the people and communities of this nation. You are known as a seasoned leader and a natural diplomat. In an increasingly partisan world, your confirmation as chairwoman of the Sentencing Commission was supported enthusiastically by both political parties. You are a judge whom lawyers praise as respectful and courteous, well-prepared, thorough, and conscientious. And you are a trailblazing judge, Minnesota's first woman federal judge, and the first woman to join the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. Your contributions go far beyond your daily 9-to-5 responsibilities. The list of civic and educational organizations to whom you have given your vision and wisdom is too long to recite here, except to say that St. John's University was blessed to be on this list for the many years you gave to our Board of Regents. In everything you do, Judge Murphy, you are above all an eager seeker of justice for all people, everywhere. For this and so much more, St. John's University recognizes you with affection and gratitude and confers upon you, Diana E. Murphy, J.D., the Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, on this 21st day of May, 2000.
Oops, there goes the hand.
Monks shouldn't kiss ladies in public.
I'd like to make a short personal statement, if you'll bear with me, and at some risk of Hillary's thinking I might be guilty of excess rhetoric. I think we all have a story about how we first came to St. John's and why. For me, it was some 46 years ago when I was a college student at the University of Minnesota. It was a combination of music and prayer that drew me. In some way that I no longer remember, I heard that there was a Benedictine monastery within striking distance of Minneapolis where you could experience what then seemed to be timeless Gregorian chanting of the daily office. One afternoon, I set out alone with a sense of adventure and the purpose of attending Compline. The ride was a lot different in those days. No freeway, no automatic shift or cruise control, no good shocks. The arrival at St. John's was not so dramatic. This Abbey church had not yet been built. There was no towering bell banner that announced the presence of this place from a distance. The very road in came from a different direction, but it was love at first sight. The beauty of the natural site, so carefully nurtured, and of the old red brick monastic buildings gave a visitor a sense of peace and, yes, stability. Today's Great Hall was the Abbey Church. In those days, the painted figures in its apse were a more powerful presence then, when they literally stood watch in the house of God. The modulated sounds of the Latin psalms and prayers, the monks appearing solemn and subdued in their dark habits, seemed to link with the eternal. This was a great impression on me this first evening, and I returned from time to time, not as often as I planned, sometimes with a friend, but usually alone, anonymous and unknown. And these visits refreshed me and gave me a feeling of connectedness in sort of a one-sided relationship with the community of strangers. I always meant to come for a retreat, but time rolled on, and marriage and children followed the relative freedom of graduate school. This place became an inactive memory. And then one day, someone called me to invite me to have lunch with the president of St. John's University, a Father Michael Blecker, suggesting that I might consider joining the board. For me, this was one of those special moments that a friend of mine calls graced. Someone else might call them fate or serendipity. But here, people who had no possible way of knowing my private attachment to St. John's had settled on inviting me to some kind of formal relationship. And of course, I accepted with alacrity, and 22 years later, here I am standing with you today. In the meantime, I've seen a lot of changes in this place, in the university, in the people who give it life, and in myself. And I've come to know some of those once faceless monks as human beings, as well as talismans of a spiritual order. Some of them are gone now. Father Michael Blecker, whose intellectual gifts and charisma attracted new resources to St. John's, and Abbot Jerome Tyson, a man of wisdom, wit, and many good virtues. It's easier, of course, and safer to talk about those who are departed rather than those still living, because the latter are still evolving and they're in a position to talk back. But you know, the whole physical place is transformed. These wonderful, boldly modern Breuer buildings blended with the old. The addition of the art building, Sexton Commons, the Science Hall, the new Science Hall, the building of the Central Square, and formation of a master plan, tying it all together in a very pleasing whole, making a total creation that the American Institute of Architects designates as a site worthy of a journey in itself. And the Abbey has been so influential during all these years, helping to stimulate and shape Vatican II, writing and publishing, spawning all kinds of endeavors, but always continuing to maintain its communal life of prayer. Simpler now, perhaps, but still at the heart of daily life. And the university, I've watched it change and grow and flourish, this community of scholars and students, together with its sister, the College of St. Benedict, producing now a wired life of the mind and a life in public service. But in the end, it is the people that have affected me the most. We hear from people who are facing crises of death or disease or heartbreak or separation, that at root it is relationships that matter the most. And we all know that, but as we go around in our increasingly hectic lives, we tend to forget it. So I'd like, in closing really, for us all to reflect on that for a minute, to reflect on the power of friendship and the grace of it. It is a challenge to hold 2 full-time jobs, each headquartered in a different part of the country, and to try to keep centered while doing it. For me, like for so many others, St. John's is a place of refuge and of continuity, a place of friendship and a spiritual home, a place where I have found friends who have helped guide me and inspire me. And I hope it may be the same for you. Thank you.
It's my privilege this afternoon to present Father William J. Byron, S.J., for an honorary degree. Father Byron is Distinguished Professor of the Practice of Ethics at Georgetown University, where he also serves as rector of the Georgetown Jesuit community. From 1982 to 1992, he was president of the Catholic University of America. Father, would you please stand? Ora et labora, prayer and work. These values, so cherished by the followers of St. Benedict, illuminate your words and actions at every turning, as priest, economist, professor, college president, author, and public servant. You have given us a legacy of written wisdom together with a life of action rooted in prayer and reflection. Your example teaches us that we cannot leave parts of ourselves at the door when we enter the different rooms of our lives. You're an economist while you are a priest while you are an economist. As an economist, you acknowledge the legitimacy of the marketplace and the profit principle. But as a priest, you remind us with compassionate persistence that we must bring our Sunday selves to work on Monday. And if we cannot, because of the greed or evil we find there, we must either change it or leave it to find a Monday that includes Sunday. For teaching us, whether we run companies or colleges, whether we are saying hello or bidding farewell, whether we are on easy street or are paving the street, to be attentive always to the only constant in life, the God who calls of each of us by name. St. John's University recognizes you with gratitude and confers upon you, William J. Byron, S.J., the Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa, on this, the 21st day of May in the year 2000.
Well, thank you all very much. You happy and relaxed graduates have no idea how uncomfortable a graduation speaker like me can be in a setting like this. I stand here in an assembly of high honors. I've been looking at your program and I see cum laude, magna cum laude, summa cum laude, and then a new category of extra summa cum laude. And I'm expected to bring words of wisdom to holders of gold and silver medals, to certificates of merit, great distinctions, and prestigious fellowships. And in the midst of all of this, I feel compelled, in the spirit of full disclosure, to inform you, new friends of mine, that I, a member of the GI generation that Tom Brokaw has heaped such great praise upon recently, I, in my collegiate years, was a member of that all-important bottom half of the class that made the top half possible. I see that qualifies me to talk to the top 97% of this class. Good to be with you, fellas. Now, another source of my present unease is the realization that I stand here as a 10 to 15-minute blockade between you and not only your diplomas, but also some great post-commencement parties. And I assure you, I'm well aware that no matter how sober the celebrations tonight, they will erase forever from your memories the name of your graduation speaker and the content of the speech. Nonetheless, it's a genuine thrill for me to be invited to slip into your commencement procession, receive an unearned degree, and have the opportunity to express my great admiration for St. John's, for the Benedictine tradition, and all the bearers of that tradition who provided the setting for your personal growth in mind, body, and spirit over the past 4 years. There's such a palpable sense of place here. It's much more than architecture, of course, but the architecture will be etched forever in your memory to remind you of this special place and the privilege that was yours to be here in these critically important years of your young lives. I chose not to call them the happiest years of your lives because although that may be true for some or even most of you, I hope that even happier years lie ahead for all of you. That will indeed be the case if you carry forth with you today the wisdom principles that St. John's University opened up for you And if you let those principles lead you and direct your choices into and through an unknown future, it would be presumptuous for me, an outsider, to tell you what those principles are. I won't even try, although I know enough about your Benedictine tradition, your humanistic curriculum, the liturgical life, and the Catholic social teachings that are integral to the St. John's experience. But I won't make the attempt to articulate those principles. I would hope, however, that you take a moment, each of you graduates, take a moment or two within the next few days to jot down some of the principles that you have acquired here and review them often. They'll provide guidance in your transit through life. That's your task, to jot them down and have them available for ready reference. My task is less personal and much more immediate. I'm here to say a few words of encouragement and farewell. I want to capitalize on the sense of place that we all experience here right now in this magnificent Abbey Church. I want to take advantage of our proximity to the cemetery, where this Benedictine community cherishes, as keepsakes for heaven, the precious remains of the men who were born from here into eternal life. And I want, in the neighborhood of your great manuscript library, to invite you to consider several verses from sacred scripture and draw from those verses principles that are both consistent with the Benedictine tradition and appropriate for practical application all through your post-graduation lives. I have 3 scriptural citations in mind, 2 from the Psalms that are chanted here in this abbey each day in Benedictine prayer, and 1 from the strong Old Testament voice of Jeremiah. The first is from Psalm 119. Bend my heart to do your will and not to love of gain. And the second is from Psalm 37. Commit your way to the Lord, trust that God will act. And the third from the prophet Jeremiah. For I know well the plans I have in mind for you, says the Lord, plans for your welfare, not for woe, plans to give you a future full of hope. When you call me, when you go to pray to me, I will listen to you. And from those 3 scriptural locations, I offer 3 brief points for your consideration. First, be wary of the love for gain. Second, commit your plans to the Lord. And third, you, each one of you, you have a future full of hope. Point 1, Carl Sandburg once wrote, tell them too much money has killed men and left them dead years before burial. I can't give you the exact citation. I found the quotation on a hand-printed card posted over the desk in a college student's dormitory room. He was a wise young man. If you follow the psalmist's advice offered today and let your heart bend in the direction of doing God's will and not to the love of gain, you will lead a balanced life. If you refuse to be possessed by your possessions, you'll find freedom and the happiness that you seek. So much affluence, so little happiness was the Wall Street Journal headline just last month over a review of Anthony O'Hare's new book, After Progress. Listen to that review. Life is good in America today, or so it seems. We're living through the longest peacetime economic expansion in our history. Unemployment is low. Technology has made our lives longer and easier than ever before. Crime is down. By virtually every measurable standard, America is living through a golden age. But, the Wall Street Journal asks, but can we measure happiness? There's nothing wrong, of course, with wanting to live better. Nothing wrong with wanting to have money and possessions. What is wrong is a style of life that's rooted in having rather than in being. You are human beings, not human doings or havings. You tell the world a lot about who you really are through your consumption choices, what you choose to buy. And you show the world what you really think of it through your production decisions, your vocational choice to participate in a specific form or level of productive activity. Do you want to make the world a better place? Do you care about anyone or anything beyond yourself? You can measure happiness with great precision by taking a look at the choices you make. That headline, "So much affluence, so little happiness," need not apply to any one of you if you learn how to immunize yourself against affluenza. Point 2, commit your way to the Lord, trust that God will act, says the 35th Psalm. Commit your plans to the Lord and your plans will succeed. This presupposes, of course, that the plans you have are commendable and committable to the Lord, that they are worthy of the Lord. Without commitment, you'll have no life at all. Yet, the broader culture that you inhabit is characterized by a hesitancy to commit. It's marked by a cultural hesitation to choose this way over that, to commit to a career, a place, a person. The word your generation finds most difficult to say is forever. Decision points generate paralysis. You may have noticed that. Vocations to marriage, to priesthood or religious life, or to the single life for some special purpose tend to be postponed. Signs of a postponed generation began to emerge among the young in America about 10 or 20 years ago. Those signs are still around, visible in a flurry of movement from place to place, job to job, or vacation destination to vacation destination. The postponed generation measures its net worth in its frequent flyer mileage. When gainfully employed, it swings, in Alice McDermott's engaging simile, from one Saturday morning to another like a monkey at the zoo. One of the wisdom principles that you surely picked up here at St. John's is that it is the truth, not work-free Saturdays, that will set you free. The principles you acquired here, my friends, the sense of place that you carry with you from St. John's, are remedies for these cultural ills that I've just touched upon. These principles that you've acquired here have prepared you to listen and to learn from the wisdom sources, for instance, like the prophet Jeremiah. And this is my third point. For I know well the plans I have in mind for you, says the Lord. Plans for your welfare, not for woe. Plans to give you a future full of hope. When you call me, when you go to pray to me, I will listen to you. Listen to you? Absolutely. You, every one of you, can count on it. A future full of hope? You bet. You've got God's word on it. Now, hope is an underutilized virtue, so be sure to let it work for you. Its object is God. As Jeremiah says elsewhere, blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose hope is the Lord. Not your over or underconfident self. That's not where hope lies. Your hope is the Lord. That's a promise, and you can count on it. The poet George Herbert has a line that you should make your own. He that lives in hope dances without music. Let hope always put a spring in your step. And G.K. Chesterton has a view of this virtue that is both striking and true. It is only when everything is hopeless, says Chesterton, that hope begins to be a strength at all. In other words, hope is no virtue at all unless things are really hopeless. So, what a source of joy and encouragement it should be to you today to realize that your God promises you a future full of hope. All you can be today is grateful. All you can try to be through all the days of your life is faithful. Be grateful, be faithful, and you will fare very well indeed. Now, just one last word. It's been said that the most dangerous occupation in America today is innocent bystander. Whenever you read about a drive-by shooting or a terrorist activity or an automobile out of control in downtown traffic, innocent bystanders get hurt, even lose their lives. I hope each one of you will always be innocent, but I also hope you'll never be mere bystanders. Lose your lives in service to others. The good life, the successful life, is the life that is lived generously in the service of others. Bystanders need not apply. Be more than bystanders in the future that begins for you today. Become involved. Get into business, politics, the professions, the arts. Get really in to whatever it is that God calls you to be and to become. Become involved in building a better world from your own personal base of faith, family, and the occupational responsibilities that will be yours. Bystanders never make a difference, but every one of you can and surely will make a difference. Why? Because your future is built upon the firm foundation that is St. John's. This special place, this tradition of which you are now an irreplaceable part. Congratulations to every one of you.
On this commencement day, we celebrate achievements of teaching and learning. I would like to take this occasion to acknowledge 6 professors who today retire from long and distinguished teaching at St. John's. Professor alumnus Brother Alan Reed, who has taught art at St. John's for 18 years. Professor alumnus Father Alexander Andrews, who taught history for 34 years. Professor Emerita Lucy Larson, who has taught accounting for 25 years. Professor Emeritus Raymond Larson, who has taught classics for 32 years. Professor Emeritus Ottmar Draconia, who has taught German for 34 years. And Professor Emeritus Father Raymond Petrozetti, who has taught philosophy for 40 years. We are grateful for the distinguished teaching of these beloved members of our faculty, and I invite them each to stand now so that we can express our gratitude and best wishes for the future. And now for the conferral of degrees.
Will the candidates for the degrees of Master of Arts and Master of Divinity please rise? Brother Dietrich, I present the candidates for the degrees of Master of Arts and Master of Divinity, which have been approved by the faculty of the university.
by virtue of the authority committed to me, I confer upon you the degrees of Master of Arts and Master of Divinity, which have been approved by the faculty of the university and for which you have been recommended. Dr. William Cahoy, Dean of the School of Theology and Seminary, please have the candidates come forward.
The degree of Master of Divinity is conferred upon Francis Louis Agnoli from Williamsburg, Kentucky. The degree of Master of Divinity is conferred upon Luis Segundo Butron from Popayan, Colombia. The degree of Master of Divinity is conferred upon Christopher Scott Caloris from Lakewood, Colorado. The degree of Master of Divinity is conferred upon Joseph Wang from Guangdong, China. The degree of Master of Arts in Pastoral Ministry is conferred upon Beatrice Christine Britz from Little Falls, Minnesota. The degree of Master of Arts in Theology with a concentration in Systematics is conferred upon Everett P. Hardy from Elmhurst, Illinois. The degree of Master of Arts in Pastoral Ministry is conferred upon Jennifer Michelle Holton from Bloomington, Minnesota. The degree of Master of Arts in Theology with a concentration in Monastic Studies is conferred upon Sun Young Gabriel Her of the Order of St. Benedict from Seoul, South Korea. The degree of Master of Arts in Theology with a concentration in Systematics is conferred upon Lori L. King from Ohio, Illinois. The degree of Master of Arts in Theology with a concentration in Liturgy is conferred upon Anne Y. Kester from Toledo, Ohio. The degree of Master of Arts in Pastoral Ministry is conferred upon Brenda Marie Kresge from Little Falls, Minnesota. The degree of Master of Arts in Theology with a concentration in Spirituality is conferred upon Kathleen M. Langer from Pierce, Minnesota. The degree of Master of Arts in Pastoral Ministry is conferred upon Karen Renee Larson from Sauk Rapids, Minnesota. The degree of Master of Arts in Liturgical Studies is conferred upon Daniel J. Murphy from Macroom, County Cork, Ireland. The degree of Master of Arts in Pastoral Ministry is conferred upon Elaine M. Newton from St. Joseph, Minnesota. The degree of Master of Arts in Liturgical Music is conferred upon Kimberly Marie Plant from Waite Park, Minnesota. The degree of Master of Arts in Theology with a concentration in Church History is conferred upon Erin Elizabeth Ryan from Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Will the candidates for the degrees Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science please rise? Brother Dietrich, I present the candidates for the degrees Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science who have been approved by the faculty of St. John's University and the College of St. Benedict.
By virtue of the authority committed to me, I confer upon you the degrees of Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science, which have been approved by the faculty of St. John's University and the College of St. Benedict, and for which you have been recommended. Dr. Cheryl Knox, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, please have the candidates come forward.
You may now be seated, and the marshals will direct each row. I ask that you hold your applause until all the diplomas are awarded. Candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Arts, egregia cum laude. Michael Patrick Cook. Paul Dale Kleinschmidt. Candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Arts, summa cum laude. Martin David Patrick Klinkhammer. Thomas John Bushlack. Jeremy Norbert Mandranak. Stephen Lee Aldrich. Brent Simon Schlow. Christopher John Brusky. Speak directly into the microphone. Christopher Arlen Stratman. Matthew Brian Kilby. Kevin Thomas Clancy, all college honors, distinction in communication. Scott Warren Whitman. Candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Arts, magna cum laude. Matthew Joseph Tingley. Samuel James Kevaney. Cody John Zilverberg, distinction in computer science. Martin Julian Ware, all college honors, distinction in Spanish. Ryan Mikhail Fay. William John Shermers. Ryan Daniel Anderson. Christopher Kevin Gleasner, all college honors, distinction in computer science. Jeffrey Michael Holdvoet. Eric Edwin Serbus. Brian Joseph Tiemann. Adam Jeffrey Rushmeyer. Mark William Thompson. Shane Ashley Stennis. Guy Adam Boyson. Robert Anthony Zalata, all college honors, distinction in theology. Eric Paul Rice, all college honors, distinction in history. John Michael Sand. Kevin William Bitterman. Matthew John Tukwa. Nicholas John Olson. David James Lalibert. Was that? Candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Arts, cum laude. Seth Christopher Snyder. Spencer Joseph Sokoli. Andrew Paul Carlson. Benjamin Lane Dahl. Robert John Steffner. Gregory Chad Pecor. James Thomas Samph. Bjorn Christian Gustafson. Michael John Hugo. Grant Richard Seeger. Chayton Paul Offord. David Thomas Kreft. Jacob Mark Kreutzer. Keith David Cornell. James Michael Healy. William Ossie Bonsi. Will the candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Science please come forward? Matthew David Byrne. David Dwayne Kiefer. Jacob David Menden. William Anthony Schneider. Will the candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Arts please come forward? I want to begin this list in memory of two students, Jonathan Michael Jansen and Paul Raymond Cunningham. Okay. John Thomas Sullivan. Jacob Justin Dilla. Okay. Adam Brisk. Marios Sansarides. Hi there. Jamie Eugenio Ramirez. I tried. Ryan David Poindexter. Jaime. Michael Ryan Tim. Christian Michael Gross. Kyle Larry Fagan. Daniel Gerard Kubis. Ryan William Teets. Benjamin James Fogel. Jeffrey Robert Stevie. Matthew Ryan Nugent. Benjamin George Lentz. Yoshiji Donald Katagiri. John Noble Saunders. Nathan Lee Bowl. Daniel Christian Larson. Daniel Eric Heffernan. Nicholas Patrick Wessinger. Reisman Ramat Nu. Ramchat. John Joseph Maslow. Thomas Joseph Spaniel. Brad Christopher Quast. Patrick James McGowan. Jeffrey David Warden. Anthony Paul Laframboise. Oh well. Matthew Robert Mullenbach. Timothy Joseph Foley. Matthew Joseph Brandel. Daniel Craig Buteau. Andrew Jacob Schneider. Paul Joseph Kieser. Anthony Robert Leaf. Mark Andrew McCarthy. Daniel L. Leibel. Matthew John Kressel. Adam Jacob Sagadol. Patrick Michael Sexton. Eric John Wicklander. John Stephen Ager. Andrew James Long. Brendan James Murphy. Joshua Daniel Barnd. Jeremy Christopher Stile. Kevin John Pedersen. Timothy Michael Kane. Jeffrey Robert Raymond. Todd Paul Lotzer. Kenneth Perlane Rolfe. Shane Matthew Langenbrunner. Robert Eric Austin. Jeffrey Patrick Morgan. Brian William Munsell. Hans William Hennen. Daniel Joseph Duhamel. Skip Brenny. Mark Thomas Newville. Andrew Charles Bulow. Lars Otto Leopold. Eric Matthew Hammerberg. J. Johnson. Ryan Timothy Thiessen. Benjamin Lloyd Abrams. Alexander Alland Young. Brian James Cody. Daniel Hebert Peabody. Anthony Raymond Grossman. Patrick Brock Chile. Benjamin Lee Murphy. Patrick Michael Sheehan. Michael Joseph Lyles. Christopher John Mazza. Jeremy David Garris. Nicholas Paul Chickowitz. Ryan James Hansen. Kyle James Perrault. Andrew John Dvorak. Jacob Jedniak. Michael John Falletti. Michael John Driscoll. Jason Mark Lay. Thomas Gage Murphy. Ryan Mitchell McLean. Patrick Joseph Hartman. Joshua Anthony Raub. Alexander Lane Evenson, All College Honors Distinction in English. Jonathan Fortune Murphy. Joseph Daniel Riley. David Lee Relke. Anthony Michael Kapanos. Joshua Thomas Hutchinson. William Charles Fogarty. Chad Richard Edlund. Brian Victor Waletsko. Chadwick James Welty. Joseph James Etten. Benjamin Kevin Selzer. Michael Paul Roeder. Albert Hugh Goodrich. Jeffrey Allen Eckstein. Andrew Paul Gregory. Brad Richard Greenwood. Joseph Thomas Lenhoff. Todd Joseph Dubé. Bashiru Allison. Eric John Summer. John Joseph Sandberg. Brent Donald Poole. Joseph Ronald Mattel. Scott Ty Vong. Nathan John Breyer. Scott Jeffrey Roberts. Ryan Franklin Gould. Christopher Kenneth Dorn. Christopher Ernest Hagan. Michael Alvin Worth. Carrie Matthew Pogachnik. Carl Edwin Nathy. Nathan Paul Collins. Corey Joel Hoffman. Richard Thomas Wendt. Okay. Michael Brian Hoffman. Scott Andrew Jansen. Craig Stephen Wenschettel. Stephen Michael Norton. Jeremy Michael Scramstead. David Ryan Renders. Timothy Jack Daniels.
Last name is Richards.
Okay. Jeremy Richard. Lawrence John Hosch. Robert James Shidla Jr. Chad Harold Gamrad. Thank you. Michael Elroy Garcia. Daniel Joseph Ryan. Ryan John Fink. Thomas David Tasto. Adam Leslie Venny. Peter Scott Schomer. Kelly Knutson. Matthew Vincent Runquist. Gregory Scott Mose. Ted Stephen Sowija. Jeffrey Daniel Baumgartner. Dale Joseph Street. Scott Lewis Zimmer. Eric Karsten Burr. Michael Chad Gully. Aaron Allen Lahr. Dustin Oliver Schultz. Chad Jeffrey Miller. Jeffrey Dennis McGrath. Todd Randall Nielsen. Brian Michael Skavnak. Michael Patrick Fierro. Sean Michael Mitchell. Gabriel Andrew Sina. Matthew William Blaisdell. Darren Matthew Grayshall. Brandon Scott Olson. Dominic Dale McLaird. Benjamin Samuel Dorer. James Ellsworth Pontius. Jeffrey Charles Schmidt. Joseph Herschel Woodruff. Jared Roger Nelson. John Lewis Reesberg. J. Timothy O'Regan, Jr. Tedros Gabriel Gemedin. Scott Christopher Haugen. Craig Eric Gundecker. Benjamin Peter Clausen. Christian Reed Anderson. Peter James Malstead. Troy Matthew Scherer. David Lewis Lardy. Brian Matthew Moeller. Grant Eugene Wibben. Matthew James Sharp. Paul Joseph Wolvert. Noah Isaac Reiche. Adam Niles Bateman. Ryan Warren Hemmingson. Timothy Peter Schaff. Andrew Michael Smith. Richard George Anderson. Michael James Mitchell. Brian Patrick O'Neill. Charles Alonzo Knowles. Nigel Anthony Negasser. Jeremy Wayne Stahlberg. Eric John Schultz. Colin Lowell McLaughlin. Thomas Daniel Lewis. Benjamin Robert Doran. Stephen Matthew Rose. Dennis Sean Moy. Damon John Terhar. Anthony James Menick. William Francis Weber. Bradley Jason O'Keefe. Michael Gerard Mickelson. Eric Michael Jarretts. Diego Vasquez. Jeremy Robert Gable. Seth Allen Handel. Scott Matthew Shenick. Peter James Tack. Scott Gerald Machi. Aaron Joseph Larson. Joshua David Van Valkenburg. Anthony Peter Foss. David Tyler Jenks. Zachary Quinn Jorgensen. Daniel Emmett Warpea. Michael John Sersch. Olale Fadahunsi. Jeffrey John Matshiner. John P. Moorhead. Daniel Adam Smith. Eric Paul Anderson. Jeff Allen Dingman. Kevin Luke Spaniel. Joshua Michael Rabideau. Michael Nicholas Tillman. Michael Sean O'Malley. Daniel James Levine. Ryan Paul Milligan. Brian James Zacco. Stephen Richard Clavercamp. Benjamin Ray Maurer. Eric Benjamin Hansen. Philip Richard Berry. William Ewart Gibson. Joel Tate Torberg. John Bruce Soma. Jeffrey Thomas Stangler. Chetwin Wesley Boom. John Bancroft Kruger. Ryan Andrew Rapaz. John Hancock Sheaf. Lee David Hoden. Brian Richard Schletty. Brian Edward Hout. Tyne Mitchell Renner. Andrew William Landkammer. Nicholas Gregory Conant. Brian Mitchell Kirchhoff. Scott Adam Martinka. Anthony James Anderson. Ryan John Schultzenberg. Brian James Winkles. Ryan Andrew Stauff. Timothy Scott Meyer. Stephen Dufresne Lynch. Corey Benjamin Stanger. Grady Nicholas McGovern. Benjamin Russell Sieben. Troy William Treppenauer. Andrew Paul Martin. Todd Joseph Singer. Ryan Carter Brown. Mark Joseph Tobin. Jeffrey Ryan Hildebrand. Christopher James Daly. Kevin Michael Sullivan. Christopher John Mackin. Anthony Richard Hansen. Nicholas Ryan Lamaker. Michael Randall Johnson. John Daniel Wolfe. Daniel Joseph Cook. Jeffrey Patrick Michalak. Carl James Ecker. Chad Fletcher Miller. Andrew David Newstrom. Chad David Broberg. Kyle Michael Kelly. Chad William Belling. Patrick Howard Perrine. Donovan Raphael Grabowski. Ryan Michael Olson. John Milton Canis. Richard Charles Peterson. Stephen Charles Broback. Nathan John Meath. Joshua McKinley. Matthew Thomas Logelin. Jason Thomas Cooney. Nirul Patel. Eric Knapp Hayes. Mark Elias Rice. Biraj Bahadur Bista, Mark David Mushard, Grant T. Timpson, Colin Edward Shaughnessy, Anthony Lane Downs, Andrew Kenneth Vose,
And now the senior ensemble, graduating members of the chamber choir and men's chorus, will sing the Alma Mater and Gaudiamus Igitur in arrangements by Dr. Axel Timer. The Pax Christi Award is the highest honor awarded by St. John's Abbey and University. It is given to individuals who have distinguished themselves by lives that exemplify the ideals of St. Benedict, who across the millennia urges us to seek after peace and pursue it. Born in Mexico, educated in Mexico, Rome, and Jerusalem, Father Samuel Ruiz Garcia was sent in 1960 to minister as bishop to the Diocese of San Cristobal de las Casas in Chiapas, Mexico. Bishop Ruiz could have chosen a life of privilege and comfort in this position, but he did not. For the next 40 years, he labored unceasingly in harsh circumstances and at times the target of violent attack to improve conditions for the indigenous peoples and other poor of his diocese. The Latin words Pax Christi mean peace of Christ. We recognize in the Most Reverend Samuel Ruiz Garcia a man of faith who has made the peace of Christ living and real for the disinherited of this earth. His humility and courage strengthen men and women throughout the world who make peace their constant quest and aim. And in this year of the Great Jubilee, we are pleased to recognize this successor of the apostles, whose way of acting is different from that of the world, who prefers nothing to the love of Christ. Don Samuel, would you please stand? Bishop Ruiz, the world learned your name in 1994 when you negotiated a ceasefire between the Zapatistas of Chiapas, Mexico, and the Mexican government. You were the sole non-indigenous Mexican whom the indigenous trusted to speak for them, and you negotiated a ceasefire which, with one brief interruption, still holds. But this story really began 40 years ago in 1960, when you arrived in the town of San Cristobal de las Casas in Chiapas to take up your new duties as bishop. You set out on muleback to learn more about your parishioners. They were largely Mayan Indians living in the remote highlands, the descendants of the original inhabitants of Mexico. On this first trip, you stayed, as was customary for bishops, with the privileged landowners of Spanish descent. This was the last time you chose to rest comfortably, Don Samuel. You looked on the poverty and abandonment of the Indians and knew that their disregarded condition was essentially opposed to God's will for all humans. You made many more arduous trips through these mountains, Don Samuel, but on these trips you stayed instead in the humble homes of the poor. You learned several Mayan languages. You learned about the Mayan culture and learned from it. You devoted the rest of your life to your dream that the Indians of your diocese would take control of their lives and find ways to express their Christian beliefs in forms meaningful within their culture. In 1974, you helped convene the Indigenous Congress in an attempt to improve conditions for Mexico's Indians. In 1988, you founded the Fray Bartolome Human Rights Center in Chiapas to investigate allegations of human rights abuses. Twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, you have repeatedly borne witness to the world of the institutionalized violence and repression towards the indigenous and poor of Chiapas, although this has made you many powerful enemies. You have learned to dodge bullets. Don Samuel, you have been called the most hated person in Mexico. You have also been called the most beloved. While your detractors call you rebel, your parishioners call you Tatik, meaning dear father in Mayan. For 40 years, Don Samuel, Tatik, you have listened with the ear of your heart to the cry of the oppressed and heard in their cry the voice of Christ on the cross. You have answered that cry. Your answer has given new hope to the poor and abandoned everywhere. For these reasons, we present you, Most Reverend Samuel Ruiz Garcia, Bishop of San Cristobal de las Casas, Chiapas, Mexico, from 1960 to 2000, with our highest honor, the Pax Christi Award, on this 21st day of May, in the year of our Lord 2000. Que el Cristo de la Paz nos lleve a todos a la vida eterna.
Several minutes ago, I was full of many things to speak to you, and now at that moment, in such a way, I am afraid that I am speechless. I was remembering the visit of Mr. Saramago several months before the award he received. Speaking to me, he said, perhaps here in Mexico and in Chiapas, you are not aware how the European world needs the ideas and upward of the Indian population. We need the work of the Indian to overcome the system that is violating the human rights everywhere. And I am convinced that Christ was right when he said that this salvation is coming up from the bottom of the society. The only question that we will answer at the end of our lives is not about science, is not about orthodoxy, but it's about orthopraxis, about love, like some of you, he said in the final speech of this evening. In fact, Christ, after he has risen, was hidden in such a way that we cannot understand how could not be recognized by people who were close to him. The two people coming and going to Emmaus, they could not recognize his visage during the trip. They could also only recognize him when we was breaking the bread. The apostles also aware that he was risen because the tomb was empty, were astonished and were not able to recognize him. Even when he said to them they must await him in Galilee, they were not able to recognize him. He came close to the lake, demanding, "Boys, do you have something?" And Peter, very angry because they were working all the night long without any success, he said, "No, nothing." And John the apostle was recognizing Jesus not by the visage, not by the face, but only because the opportunity to see a lot of fishes coming in that case when this foreign said to them, put the net next to the right hand of your ship. And that's why we can perhaps say that Jesus is identified with every person around us, with the workers, with the clients, with the people taking care of one garden. He is Christ represented by people around us. But also, and you know, because this university is sending often people to different parts of the world to be involved in different projects, that the hope from the world is coming for the third world from the bottom of the society. We need then to overcome this situation that we actually have. I mean, look in your faces. Was nobody angry when we was receiving the document telling that you were finishing some stage of your preparation? All of you were happy. Meanwhile, I was remembering situations in Chiapas of illiteracy. Many Indian population were not able to study even the elementary school. We can remember that at the beginning of the invasion of Spain to those lands in Latin America countries, they found out the Indian population very developed, and they described that on their books. Even we can remember some Indians became teachers on Europe, teaching in Paris or in other universities. But a short time later, the University of Salamanca was discussing if the Indian population of Latin American countries were able to receive the baptisms, or even if they are human beings, or almost close to be children, but not human beings. The domination was overcoming the situation in such a way that was justified the slavery of the Indian population on the world. But now we are looking at another situation. I took contact with several people on my diocese that never had the chance to go to the school, but they know to learn and write by themselves, only with the help of somebody else, and reading the Bible to learn how to read and write. Were not 2 or 3 persons, but a lot of persons that I know that they did like that. They are also another that are able to study, and it's very interesting to see that everybody of those people is not going outside of their population, but coming back in order to help own communities. We need now not only universities sending people to serve the patient or the people that are in the bottom of the society with some projects, but trying to direct all the university studies and programs to serve this population and to involve them in order that they can be able to study normally, and also to help us to overcome the situation that is going on everywhere of this system that is calculating that it's impossible that everybody would be on the shadow of the market. That is the only way that they are foresee the economical salvation of the world. Everybody who is under the shadow of the market can have the salvation, the economical salvation, historical salvation. People who is outside of the market is condemned to die. But also, they decided, people who knows how is working this system, that a percentage of people will be not able to be covered by the market and will have the destination to die. That's why when the church is having the auction for the poor, he's putting the hand on the right place. He is really telling for the future that our salvation is coming from the bottom of the society. There are the values, and also they are very aware for their contribution for the transformation of the world. Let's convert yourselves in servants of the people who is on the bottom of the society in order to provoke the emergency of this population to save us for the transformation of the society, in order to be really not only by words but by facts, brothers and sisters. Thank you very much.
There are two groups to whom we need to pay tribute. The first are the people who have smiled the deepest and now and again shed a tear these last several hours. The mothers and fathers, grandmothers and grandfathers, brothers and sisters, relatives, and beloved friends of today's graduates. Thank you for all you have done to make this day possible, and most especially for the love and support which have brought these graduates to this time of new beginnings. The second group to thank deeply is assembled in the choir stalls behind this podium. The faculty and staff of St. John's University and their colleagues from the College of St. Benedict. These dedicated educators have labored together with generosity and wisdom to profess the liberal arts education, which is the signature achievement of today's gratitude. In gratitude, let us give them all a round of applause. We are about to break out of ritual time. As we do so, let us put on the armor of light and enter anew into a world crying out for love and service, wisdom and justice, a world where the meaning of what we have celebrated will be an ever-present source of guidance and strength. Before we go, we need a song and a blessing to send us on our way. Please stand.
God, our Creator, in the beginning you sent forth your word, and all came into being, and without that word nothing came to be. Your light of life has shone in the darkness of our world, and through your Holy Spirit you now send us forth to bring your light to a world caught in darkness. We ask your blessing upon this new beginning, upon our graduates, their parents and relatives and friends, upon the administration and faculty and staff of this university, upon all who rejoice in your presence in our midst. May the light of your presence never fade from our lives, and may we be forever enlivened by the Spirit you release in us this day. We ask this through Christ, our risen Lord. Amen. And may Almighty God bless us all, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.